Winter, 1943. The Atlantic rolled black and endless, lit by flashes of naval flares. Below deck, the captured soldiers of Rommel's Afrika Korps sat chained and seasick. They still whispered the word Heimat, home, as if repeating it could summon it out of the fog. They had fought under banners that promised destiny. Now, the only sound was the grind of chains and the creak of a Liberty ship that smelled of diesel and salt. When the skyline of New York rose from the mist, even the most loyal among them fell silent. They had seen bombed ports and desert ruins, never a city that glittered like chrome in daylight. Smoke curled from skyscrapers like exhalations of industry. It looked less like an enemy than a planet built by another species. They were unloaded at the piers under the eyes of American MPs, who looked too young, too casual. No dogs, no boots striking in rhythm, just the shuffle of paperwork and the hiss of cigarettes. A corporal with freckles offered them water and said, "Welcome to Tennessee, boys." Not prisoners, not Nazis, just boys. For men raised to expect vengeance, this ordinary decency was unbearable. One whispered, "They mock us with kindness." Another answered, "No, worse, they mean it." The train rumbled south through snow, past towns with names no German tongue could pronounce. At every station, children waving, neon signs blinking, factories roaring. A country in full production, alive with unending noise. They watched workers pour out of steel mills, white, black, Italian, Irish, all shouting, laughing, filthy and free. Back home, such chaos would be called weakness. Here, it powered an empire. A sergeant murmured, "If this is weakness, God help the strong." The camp was ringed with barbed wire, but inside it felt less like a prison than a strange village. There were workshops, baseball fields, even a theater. Every morning, the Americans marched the POWs to breakfast, eggs, milk, butter. They could hardly believe it. Back home, German civilians were rationing horse meat. The guards were polite. Some learned bits of German. They played cards through the fence. Freedom, it turned out, didn't always need open gates. Sometimes it just needed respect. German officers tried to hold the line. They banned fraternization. They ordered the men to salute portraits of Hitler hung in secret barracks. They held education evenings to remind them who they were. But the fences could not keep out radio waves. From the guard towers, American jazz leaked into the night. Trumpets, swing, laughter. Men who had once marched to Wagner now tapped their feet in the dark, ashamed and alive. One lieutenant wrote in his diary, "The music has no discipline, no order, and yet it fills the air with joy. How can disobedience sound so beautiful?" In the camp canteen, a soldier bought a bottle of Coca-Cola with his work tokens. He turned it over in his hand, the shape, the label, the fizz like captured sunlight. He took one sip and froze. "This," he said quietly, "is what victory tastes like." To the Americans, it was sugar and bubbles. To him, it was proof that comfort could exist without conquest. Every ideology he'd been taught collapsed with that taste of cold sweetness. A guard named Henderson shared his lunch with a prisoner. When asked why, he said, "You're hungry, ain't it?" No speeches, no politics, just an instinctive gesture. The Germans stared at him as if he'd spoken blasphemy. Mercy, without reason, was more frightening than punishment. It meant the world didn't obey the logic of race or power. By 1944, the male censors noticed the tone changing. Gone were the lines about final victory. Now they wrote of open skies, of the food, of the decency of their captors. One wrote, "We were told Americans were mongrels. If that is so, may Germany one day be a kennel." Not all surrendered easily. Fanatics formed underground cells punishing traitors who spoke English or showed curiosity. There were midnight beatings, whispered denunciations, secret trials. Ideology dies slowly, and always with violence. Yet, even the zealots could not explain away the sight of black and white soldiers joking side by side, or the efficiency of women running factories, or the freedom of newspapers criticizing their own president. The contradictions multiplied until faith itself began to crack. Snow drifted across the Texas plain. The camp orchestra, half German, half American, played Silent Night. Voices blended, accented, uneven, sincere. A guard said afterwards, "That's the first time I ever felt sorry for them." A prisoner replied, "That's the first time I ever felt human again." When Germany surrendered, the prisoners lined up to hear the news. No one cheered. They simply stood, heads lowered, as if listening for something that would never return. One young corporal whispered, "Then it is over." His comrade answered, "No, it is just beginning." Repatriation ships carried them back across the same gray sea. They left behind camp libraries, baseball diamonds, and the strange, unbearable freedom they had tasted. Many arrived in a country they no longer recognized, ruins, ration lines, silence. And in their pockets, they carried a new infection, curiosity. They spoke of America in whispers, careful not to seem enchanted. But years later, when the Federal Republic rose from the rubble, it bore faint traces of what they'd seen. Individual rights, open press, jazz in the bars. Decades later, historians called it the quiet conversion. No bombs, no leaflets, just the steady erosion of hate by exposure to normal life. The camps had become laboratories of humanity. Every Coke bottle, every baseball game, every small kindness had been a weapon more potent than propaganda. One of those former prisoners, now an old man, visited Texas in 1972. He stood where the fences had been and said to a reporter, "Here I learned that power is loud, but freedom whispers." He paused, looked at the open sky, and smiled. "We were defeated long before we knew it, not by armies, by decency."